Hello lovely people, it is a chill Saturday and I think I'm going to use this opportunity to make a video where I compare the Subliminal palette from Pat McGrath to the Natasha Denona Glam palette. This is actually a video that was suggested by one of you lovely people via Instagram. You asked me if I would be willing to do a comparison video between the two, and honestly I have to thank you for the wonderful idea because I think it's a fantastic video idea. So thank you for that. And like I said, because it's a Saturday and I'm not going anywhere, we are going to do that different eye look on each eye thing, where we compare the palettes actually how they look on the eye when you apply them, because sometimes I think swatches can be a little bit misleading. Things can look very similar or very different on swatches, but then when you apply them on your eye, bam, they look very similar. So I think what I'm going to do is I want to start off with the looks, and I'm going to try to select shades which are as similar in the two palettes as possible. And after we complete the look, I am going to go into details about how these palettes are similar and how they differ from each other. To start off this video, let's choose the eyeshadows we're going to be using. Now let me tell you, it's going to be a relatively neutral look, because if I want to do something that is comparable on both of my eyes, we're going to have to stick to like the really neutral shades. So I think just looking at the two palettes, if I look at the Pat McGrath Subliminal palette, we are going to have to use this shade, this shade, this shade, and definitely this shade, which is like the most basic bitch look you can ever imagine. I think we're going to make it a little bit more interesting afterwards, just so I can stress what one of the differences, one of the biggest differences between these two palettes is. And I'm going to leave a little bit of space in between so we can swatch next to them these shades that I find the most similar in the Natasha Denona Glam palette, so that we can make all the right choices for this look. Now let's take the Natasha Denona Glam palette. Off the bat I can tell you, I think this shade is going to be part of our look. This shade is going to be a part of our look, and I will have to decide between this one and this one for the metallic lid shade, and I'm pretty sure this is our fourth champagne shade. So let me swatch these three first, and then we're going to pick what's the closest to the like more browny taupe metallic shade that was in the Subliminal palette. So here we have the neutral from the Glam palette. Here we have the deeper brown from the Glam palette. And here we have like the champagne shade from the Glam palette. So far you can tell the differences aren't extremely dramatic, they are only very insignificant. For instance, between these two shades, I would say the shade from Natasha Denona definitely pulls a bit more taupe and cool toned. The two deeper browns are almost indistinguishable from each other, although this one is a little bit deeper and a little bit more cool leaning. And between these two shades, I think the difference is that this one is still a little bit more of a champagne, whether this one is more of a taupe champagne. It's very interesting to put all of these shades next to each other, because you can definitely spot those like subtle undertone differences that you might not have picked up otherwise. So for my lid shade, I am going to swatch, like I said, this shade and this shade from the Natasha Denona palette. Let's see, I'm going to swatch one of the shades a bit more here, and the other shade a bit more here. So neither of them is really like an absolute perfect match for the shade from the Subliminal palette. However, I do think this one maybe comes a little bit closer, because it has a bit of those more pinkier taupe tones that the shade from the Subliminal palette. And I did actually do a look using this shade relatively recently in a video with the Glam palette, so I think I'm going to use this one. So on this side I'm going to do Subliminal from Pat McGrath, and on this side I'm going to do Glam from Natasha Denona. Starting off with the Pat McGrath eyeshadow, so the light taupe transition shade. To be honest with you, based on my experience with the matte shades from both of these palettes, I don't expect the quality of the mattes to differ much from each other, because both brands have really good formulas when it comes to their mattes. Now I'm going to clean off this brush very well on a microfiber cloth that I have here next to me, and I'm going to go into the shade from the Natasha Denona palette, which, like I said, to me leans a little bit more true taupe. So a little bit cooler toned than the one from Pat McGrath. And I think on the eye it does also pull cooler toned. Now the first very interesting thing I want to point out is if I look at someone with my skin tone, which is neutral leaning warmer, and I look at how the two eyeshadows seem in terms of like how flattering they are on my skin tone, I definitely have to say that as of now, I think the Pat McGrath side just looks more flattering on my skin tone because it pulls a little bit more neutral toned, whereas the side on Natasha Denona definitely has a little bit of those like greyish undertones, and it looks slightly more unflattering on me. I'm sure the look is going to come together in the end, and it's going to look fine on this side as well, but if I have to be completely honest in terms of undertones, I feel like the Pat McGrath side wins by a long shot for me, just because it looks more neutral and more flattering as far as this shade is concerned. Now I am going to take a somewhat smaller crease brush because I want to actually now deepen up both sides with the deep brown shade. So I'm taking the deep brown from Pat McGrath and I'm going to start fluffing that here into my outer corner. And you can see how easily that applied and how easy it was to smoke out the outer corner of my eye. Now for my other eye, I'm going to take the deep shade in the Natasha Denona palette, and I think this one is going to be much deeper, so I need to be slightly more careful with it. To say, for such a deep shade, this is applying really lovely and it's very easy to blend out, but you can definitely tell how much deeper this is. There's drama on this side, but the drama is taken up a few notches on this side. I'm going to take my Pixie Epoxy glitter glue and apply that on the moving part of my lid where I didn't apply the matte shade, because I want to apply the metallic shadows over a glitter glue. This is how I always apply my metallic shadows. I am taking the shade from Pat McGrath, just using my finger, and applying that all over my lid. Cleaning off my finger and applying this shade from Natasha Denona on the other side. Oh, these two shades definitely come out very, very different when you put them on the eye. Let's just finish up the look before we do anything else. I'm going to take the inner corner shade, starting off with the Natasha Denona side because I dipped my brush into it first. So this is the champagne metallic that goes into the inner corners. Dipping my brush into the Pat McGrath side now and applying that in my inner corners as well. Taking a smudger brush and going consequentially into the deeper shade and the metallic shade on both sides on my lower lash line. So I'm taking the deep brown on this side and the deep brown on the Natasha side. Then taking the metallic shade on the Pat McGrath side and going to repeat the same on the side with Natasha. Taking this Kiko eyeshadow stick in the number 38, which is a beautiful taupe, and applying that in the inner, like the waterline on both of my eyes. Now, if you were to leave the look at the neutral shades, I would say, except for the metallic shades on the lid, the two looks are quite similar to each other. Of course, if you look at the Natasha Denona palette, there is so much more variety in terms of the neutral metallic shades that you can put on your lid, and you can definitely tell that the metallic shade on this side has also much more impact. It's one of those much denser metallic shades, whereas on the side of the Pat McGrath look, we have this shade, which doesn't necessarily have a very metallic finish to it. I have to say, these two shades, these three shades actually, all have this more satin finish to them other than the punchy, dense metallic shades. Those started to appear in Pat McGrath's palettes past Mothership 4, so in a lot of her, not in a lot of her, in her first 3 palettes, the 1, 2 and 3, you will find this formula, which is a more like satin shimmer formula and almost can double as a matte. So from what I can tell you with my experience using this eyeshadow palette, I will often use these 2 shades, for instance, as matte shades through my crease, or I will apply them very lightly on my lid as a base for one of the topper shades. Which brings us to where the 2 looks are going to start diverging from each other. What I would normally do with this side of my look is I would apply this shade, which is the most beautiful, like blue, purple topper shade. I would apply this shade all over my lid over top of the taupe brown, just to give it a bit of sparkle and a little bit of something more interesting in terms of an effect. So you can see this immediately changes the whole vibe of the look, and you can play a lot in terms of the different bases and topper shades that you put on the side of Subliminal. Now the Glam palette doesn't really have those typical topper shade formulas, so if I don't want to leave that side hanging, the only shade that has a bit more like of that sparkle and pizzazz is this pink shade over here. So what I can do is I can apply a very light layer of that, especially in the center of the lid here, just to give it a bit more light. So at this stage you can see the 2 looks really diverged from each other, which also comes back to how these palettes are different from one another, but we're going to come back to that in a second. Now let's break it down. What is similar between these 2 palettes? When I show you these 2 palettes, I think the clear similarity between them and what unites them is that they're both cooler toned eyeshadow palettes. And I feel like this is pretty much where a lot of the similarities between them end, and from this point onwards they diverge from each other quite a bit. First of all, you can immediately tell that there is a difference in the amount of eyeshadows that you get. You get only 10 eyeshadows in the Subliminal palette, whereas you get 15 with the Natasha Denona palette. And of course there is quite the significant difference in price. This is in the Natasha Denona's smaller format, so it will cost you about $65, whereas the Pat McGrath eyeshadow palette is a big mothership, so it costs $125. Now if we disregard the price, if you're not interested in the price and you're just interested in, okay, what are the differences so that I can decide for myself which one will suit me better. Let me start with the most clear and obvious, like poking you in the eyes difference. If you remove the 4 special shades, the Pat McGrath side is very similar to the cooler toned eyeshadow in the Glam palette. There are subtle differences, as you could see on my eyes, but overall you can achieve pretty similar looks. However, when you uncover the special shades on Pat's side, you immediately see pops of color, duochromes, different textures, and also so much more versatility in the types of looks that you can achieve. Let me swatch the 4 topper shades for you, because I think that will give you a bit of an idea of what you're getting extra with the Subliminal palette. This is a very beautiful, like sort of cooler leaning gold. Then you have the most beautiful like magenta purple with blue sparkles in it. This shade is just so incredibly beautiful. Then we have obviously the Blitz blue shade, which is very vibrant, very pretty, and last but not least you have the topper shade, which I had on my lid over the neutral shade, which has somewhat like of a clear base and really beautiful turquoise greenish bluish sparkle to it. So you get these extra 4 shades, which in my opinion give you also so much more variety and so many more options if you're going to use the Subliminal palette. Yes, you only get 10 shades, but you can do so much more with it, because you can go the neutral way, you can go dark blue smoky eye, you can do something with the gold topper shade over here to create something which is like very classic, very neutral, and with a little bit of that golden tone to it. You can use this shade to create the most stunning duochrome and like metallic foiled eye ever. So this is what the Pat McGrath shadow palette offers you. What it doesn't offer you, and what you will find in the Glam palette though, is much more variety in terms of the tones of cooler neutral shades that you find. What the Pat McGrath eyeshadow palette has to offer you in terms of cool neutral eyeshadows is only these 6 options over here. So you get 3 mattes, amongst which this transition shade, this beautiful deeper brown, and also a black shade, something you're not going to get in the Glam palette, but I feel like you don't really need it because you have the really deep brown. And then you have these 3 satin metallic shades. You get a very standard champagne shade, you get these 2 cooler toned satin shades, one of them leaning a bit more taupey brown and one of them leaning a little bit more of a lavender purple. None of these metallic shades though have like a very dense, very foiled metallic finish to them. They're going to be a bit more of that like subtle sheen on the eye, something that you can like pop on your lid, blend out and be done. So these are very much like a one and done type of eyeshadows. However, what you can do with these shades is you can use them, each of these 3 shades can be used as a base to put any of these topper shades over top, and the combinations are, well, they're not endless, but they're quite very many. For instance, you can create really stunning looks when you layer this shade and this shade. You can layer these 2 shades, you can apply the brown shade, and then you can put this one or this one over top. You can do something with this shade where you do a neutral look and then you do a blue eyeliner. So I feel like the variety of looks you can achieve with the Subliminal palette is far greater compared to the Glam palette. The Glam palette has, I think, 5 mattes in total, but I also feel like you don't really need more mattes because you can achieve quite a lot already with the ones that you have. Given that this is a very monochromatic neutral palette, I think you don't really need more than these 5 mattes to achieve the neutral looks that this palette offers you. This palette offers you quite a lot of variety in terms of like the metallic shades. You can go like the more pinky taupey road, you can go the more like silvery road, you even have this pop of gold here. And what I actually wanted to do is quickly compare this gold to the topper shade that you have in the Pat McGrath palette, which by the way is going to be very different, but just so you guys can see, because there are golds in both palettes, you can clearly tell this is a deeper, much different tone of gold compared to the one from Pat McGrath. The Pat McGrath one, by the way, also has like these really beautiful like pinky sparkles to it when you shine artificial light on it. The one from Natasha Denona, while very beautiful and very foiled, is just a dense metallic. It doesn't have any extra glitter or any extra complexity to it. While this offers you a lot of versatility in terms of the undertones of the neutral shades, you're not going to get much more out of it. This is pretty much what you're going to get. You're going to get an iteration of this look with different undertones of browns and taupes, but you're not going to get anything more out of it because it's not the point of this palette to offer you more. In terms of textures, you're not going to get anything different other than mattes and dense metallics. So what this palette lacks is definitely like the more glittery finish. When I think about the way I personally use these 2 palettes, I have to be honest with you. If I'm going to do a neutral look where I want a little bit more impact out of the only neutral shadows, I am going to be reaching for the Glam palette, just because I like the denser metallic textures of the lid shades much more than I like the satin texture of the shades that you will find in the Subliminal palette. So these 2 shades. These 2 shades would never be something that I would put on my lid, call it a day, and think that it's enough for me. It will never be enough. I will need to put some of the topper shades to make them feel more metallic, more sparkly, and more interesting. So I think I reach for these palettes for 2 very different reasons. I don't use the Subliminal palette to create only neutral looks. I use it to create those more complex looks, incorporating the topper shades. However, if I want to do something more interesting with neutral shades incorporated, I would still choose for the Subliminal because the Glam doesn't give me that option. Just saying. So guys, I feel like there is no reason for me to ramble any further about these 2 palettes. The similarities and the differences were quite clearly stated and also quite obviously made by the 2 looks that we did with them. Let me know in the comments which one do you prefer, do you even have a preference, or you think both of them have a place in your collection? Do you own both of them? Do you own only one of them? Why did you choose for it? As usual, I'm a nosy person and I want to know everything about your thoughts regarding these 2 palettes. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!